A very warm welcome to all our viewers of today's seminar, and it's an honor and privilege for me to greet you all. Welcome to today's SCEEUS seminar. It's supposed to be pronounced like the Greek god Zeus. That is the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies, a newly established center which was established earlier this year, with the task to provide policy-relevant analysis on Russia and Eastern Europe. And Eastern Europe here is understood as the countries of Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. We are also tasked to participate actively and contribute to the discussion and conversation on these countries and to produce analysis of knowledge. My name is Fredrik Lödqvist, and I am director of the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies since March this year. And the SCEEUS, Stockholm Center of Eastern European Studies, is organizationally based at the Swedish Institute for International Affairs, UI. And today's discussions we will devote to Russia, the situation in Russia, particularly now in connection with the recently held elections in Russia. Understanding what is going on in Russia, its consequences and implications not only for Russia itself and the Russian population, but also for the rest of the world is a very important task also for our center. We've just had some 10 days ago Duma elections and other elections in Russia, and this is a good time to take stock on what's going on and where Russia is heading. Both internally, but also what the consequences are for not only neighboring countries, but European and global affairs. We have seen over the years an increasingly repressive climate inside Russia, and also an increasingly antagonistic Russia in international affairs, not least in its own neighborhood. One dramatic event was, of course, the poisoning and imprisoning by Navalny, but we have seen a number of various worrying signs when it comes to domestic developments. Therefore, I'm extremely glad to host two very prominent guests today to shed some light on these developments and events. In today's webinar titled Russia and the West After the 2021 State Duma Elections. What implications do the conduct, results, and repercussions of the elections have for the Russian domestic and foreign affairs? And today with us we have Vladimir Milov, who I think needs no further introduction to most of our viewers, but who is a former, among many other things, deputy Russian energy minister, well-known opposition leader, a close associate of Navalny, among many other things. And Anastasiya Sergeeva, who is a director of the Watt Foundation in Poland and member of the board of Association for Free Russia Association, a civil society activist and member of the advocacy group of EU-Russia Civil Society Forum. This webinar today, most of you are viewing this through Zoom, where you had to register, but it's also live streamed on Facebook. It will be recorded and you will be able to watch it also later through the YouTube channel of UI, the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Some housekeeping rules. Vladimir and Anastasiya will make some introductory remarks. I will then join the conversation and ask some follow-up questions to their introduction. And then we will have an interactive part where you, viewers and listeners, can join with your questions and your comments. And if you're watching this on Zoom, please use the Q&A function in the middle, in your bottom bar of your Zoom program, to ask your questions or post your comments. And if you're watching this through Facebook, you can use the comment function to send your questions, which will then be forwarded to me. When you ask a question or give a comment, please state your full name and your possible affiliation, and please keep the questions short and succinct. I'm also very glad that both Vladimir and Anastasiya are happy that they are able to join us physically here in Stockholm today. There has been quite a lot of attention also from Swedish media and others. This seminar is in a way the second of our seminars on the situation in Russia after the elections. We had a webinar last week with Martin Krag, Kalle Knivele and Karolina Wendel-Palin in Swedish commenting on the election results. And of course, this is something that we will keep an eye on. But now, without further ado, please, Vladimir, your analysis and reflections on developments in Russia, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your serious and in-depth interest in the political situation in Russia as such, and the elections in particular, because what I see often in the West and in Europe, not in your case, fortunately, but in many cases, the analysis of elections is limited to the headline conventional wisdom that Putin got the desired results on paper, and that is it. That is not it, and I'm here to tell you about so much drama unfolding behind these headlines that simply provide some official figures. This is somewhat similar to what we saw last year in Belarus, where dictator Lukashenko had easily drawn up 80% support for him at the presidential elections, but I'm sure you know that that was not the end of story, but was not even the beginning. And in Russia, we have a similar situation because the picture that we saw during the voting weekend from September 17th through 19th is a picture of great struggle. Struggle of people of Russia who want a much more normal, inward-looking and inclusive system, who are tired of highly monopolistic Putin system of governance, where a majority of ordinary Russians doesn't have any real say, any real influence on things. Russians have been living for 8 consecutive years with decline and stagnation of real incomes. We are now on average about 10–15% poorer than we were 8 years ago, where we didn't see any economic growth since 2008. And I mean, I can list all these issues which people are fed up with. Major problem is that the continuing supermajority of the ruling party, supermajority in parliament, dominance in Russian politics, does not provide any mechanisms of feedback from the society. So it's not a two-way street. Russian politics is not a two-way street. There's only one way, and actually, if you try to go in the opposite direction, you get squashed by the repressive machine. So I think it was very visible for those who really observed these 3 voting days, is that there was a picture of 2 Russias going to the polls. First appeared on Friday, mostly in the first half of the day, when we had these huge lines of employees of various state and state-affiliated companies who were obviously brought there by force to specifically have this show of strength, show of force on the first voting day. And they were standing in huge lines, refusing to talk to journalists, refusing to explain why they are here to vote as early as Friday morning. Obviously, they were doing it by force because their employers have told them to do, threatening with the consequences. And there was the other totally different Russia, which mostly came to polling stations by the end of Sunday with a huge protest sentiment. People were not even hiding that they're there because they want to end the monopoly rule of the ruling United Russia Party. And the protest turnout was so high that many experienced observers have said that we haven't seen anything like that since 2011. 2011 was the year of major protest voting and subsequent street protests in Moscow and across Russia. So as a matter of fact, yes, Putin managed to get the needed results on paper. United Russia still has supermajority, although, importantly, it had lost several dozen seats in the State Duma compared to 2016, and it was not able to reach a 50% threshold under a proportional party list vote. That might seem a minor development, but it's extremely important because first, many political commentators correctly describe Russian elections as a referendum of trust towards incumbent authorities. And in the so we don't have real much political competition. All the officially allowed opposition parties are, but subordinates of United Russia. So essentially, this is all about whether you trust the ruling party or not. And they got less than 50%, which in a referendum, less than 50% means no. A majority of Russians voted against the ruling party under proportional system. And second thing that is particularly important, because this is the last big federal event on the road to 2024, where Vladimir Putin wants to extend his rule indefinitely. And Putin had specifically, unlike the previous election campaigns, where he snubbed United Russia, said it's up to Medvedev or somebody. It's, well, I'm the big guy in Russian politics, and this is just a party. I mean, come on, let them perform. This time, he personally, very actively engaged in United Russia campaign. On the June Congress of United Russia, he spoke and personally announced the top 5 people for electoral party list, including Shoigu, Lavrov, and some other relatively popular figures. And right before, a few weeks before the vote, he actually announced this payment of 10,000 rubles to Russian pensioners, which essentially was announced specifically. And this is, again, 2021 brought us absolutely unheard of taste of lawlessness in Russian politics, where rules started to be just explicitly ignored. And this time, Russian legislation, electoral legislation, specifically forbids bribery of voters. But Putin announced this 10,000 ruble payment to pensioners at the meeting with United Russia candidates and explicitly tying it to United Russia electoral result and the party attaining the majority. However, this did not yield any particular surge in support. United Russia approval ratings, even according to Kremlin loyal pollsters, had remained at historic lows at around 30%, even right before the elections. All Putin's efforts to boost it didn't work. And electoral results gives them 49 something percent, but I strongly advise you to read a detailed analysis by electoral mathematician Sergei Shpilkin, who's been doing his analysis for years. What he does is he does the statistical analysis of more than 96,000 polling stations in Russia and the specific results. I wouldn't go into too much detail, but his estimate, and he's been very credible and very publicized over the years with analysis of Russian election fraud. Mr. Shpilkin concludes with his mathematical analysis that there has been about 14 million stolen fraudulent votes for United Russia out of 28 million total. United Russia got total 28 million votes, 14 million is 50%. Without it, the ruling party will receive only just above 30% of the votes, which they should according to polls, and will have just less than 200 seats in a 450 seat chamber, which is their place. I mean, just a big faction, not just the constitutional majority, not even a supermajority. So the extent of fraud was unprecedented, and it was the only way how the authorities were able to beat the extremely high, unprecedentedly high surge in demand for protest voting among ordinary Russians. So fraud was the only answer. We're really moving towards Lukashenko-style system where the results are simply drawn up. I mean, I wouldn't go into detail. I'm not even mentioning that these elections happened in a total repressive environment. Major opposition figures were jailed or expelled from the country, or criminal investigations open against them. Dozens of prominent independent candidates were dismissed from elections under what I call Iranian system. This was done in an extrajudiciary manner, not even on illegal grounds, but by arbitrary decisions of electoral commissions. And so on and so forth. Total dominance of the ruling party in the state-controlled media field, and many other stuff like declaring, like, we haven't passed a single day of the campaign without somebody being declared foreign agent, undesired organization, new criminal case opened, somebody's house is raided, and I'm sure you had all this feedstock of bad news from my country. Despite that, Putin did not manage to crush the protest movement. It was visible and it was strong. And it was sort of leveling off with United Russia in most districts where the ruling party had won. The fight was like 50-50. They won with not too big of a margin. There were dozens of districts where United Russia candidates have lost to those recommended by Alexei Navalny's smart voting system. The opposition managed to reach out to millions and millions of people despite permanent attempts to block us on the internet, even using big tech companies like Google or Apple to block our resources and so on. So, bottom line, all these efforts, all these repressions, all this fraud was not able to kill the will of the Russian people to call for a change in policy course, to dismantle the political monopoly of United Russia. I think there's not enough attention paid in the West and in Europe to this struggle element. Many people just end up their commentary citing the official results. But I think what's most important is the struggle, because it gives hope. It gives a lot of understanding that many millions of Russians really want change. They want a more open, inclusive, transparent system, which is responsible in front of the country's own citizens, not separated by barbed wire and guns. And this call was visible. It gives us a lot of hope because Putin tried to essentially kill us, destroy our movement, hold the elections the way he wanted. He didn't manage to do that. They don't even celebrate. Medvedev, former prime minister, former president, and head of the United Russia Party, refrained from attending the celebratory party after election because there's nothing to celebrate, because this State Duma is elected not by real Russians, but by fraudulent votes. I think everybody in Russia is appreciating that, and it's a Pyrrhic victory for Putin, because they were not able to crush the resistance. Furthermore, you probably saw yesterday's news, they're opening more new criminal cases against Navalny's network. If they won, if they have to celebrate, why do that? But because in real life, they understand that they have lost organic support on the ground. That's a very important conclusion from that election, that there is not much organic support for Putin and his party on the grassroots level anymore. And they have to utilize extreme repressions and extreme fraud to still hold on to power. I think I'm probably going to be talking a bit about the Western dimension and how Europe should react in the Q&A session, but that's the general picture. My best advice, don't discuss the official, completely drawn up results. Discuss the struggle, the drama that is involved, the demand from Russian people for a much freer, fairer system, for a change of course, for ending of repressions, also ending of aggressive foreign policies. We need to talk about that as well. So there's this huge, strong sentiment in the Russian society that Putin's policies have to change. It was very visible. It was only covered by extreme repression and fraud. And Putin might still hold on to power for some time, but there's little he can do to stop this big underground fire that is mounting. And it's very clear picture that it's a ruling dictatorship versus the rest of the country, which very actively wants and demands change. So I personally have a lot of hope observing this results from what happened on election days. I'll finish here and we're happy to take part in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vladimir. Now over to you, Anastasiya, on your reflections and comments on what's been going on, and perhaps also of some of the things that Vladimir said.
Yes, thank you. Actually, I agree with Vladimir with the most part in most. And what I could add to his comments, first of all, Putin personally and his mirror circle actually they don't have good decisions and good ways and good strategies during last 2 years. Since his last presidential elections, he could choose between bad decision and another bad decision. And this election campaign is a good example, because they had two options. They could release to some extent the situation and give some spaces for opposition, for independent part of citizens, for those who are underrepresented now in Russia. And according to the evaluation of Grigory Yudin, it is about 1/3 of population. So it's people who are not represented in any level of power, both local, regional, and federal. Or he could choose the repressive way. And in this case, he should struggle with delegitimization and lack of legitimacy of his power. So he chose this second option, and now we can see how his situation is going more difficult, even more than it was half a year ago. First of all, because nevertheless, he with these elections, he couldn't show, at least to the Russian elites in regions, that he sustains the power and he is the best candidate for 2024. There were hesitations about his future in power 2 years ago after Moscow elections, when there were great protests because of the repressions against independent candidates. And since then, nothing changed. We could see that last year voting for constitution amendments didn't bring him any more legitimacy than it was. And this year also, these elections showed that he has crisis of legitimacy. The second point is also again about Communist Party, which is now struggling with Kremlin and with election commission for their votes, and actually it is shown that the current system of cooptation of elites, cooptation of semi-independent or dependent political actors in Russia is failed. And now not only communists, but other satellite parties are not sure about their results, about their place, and about their future. So this cause the deterioration of the system from the inside, and this is a really important thing. As Vladimir has told, the most issue is that the public opposition movement is destroyed, and almost no public activity, public political independent activity is possible inside the country nowadays. Also, only limited civil society and human rights defending activity could be done publicly inside Russia. And this gives us additional challenges and additional space to think about new strategies. But it doesn't mean that there is no opposition movement and no people who really want changes and do something for these changes in Russia. Opposite, we can see more and more people who want to struggle, who are ready to struggle, and who will not give up from it. I believe this could be the main comments from my side, and the rest I will tell during the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, both Vladimir and Anastasiya, for your introductory remarks. And I think you have painted a picture, as you see it, of the holding of these elections and the context and the climate which were there held. I would like perhaps to follow up with some questions of the significance of this. How can we see this in a larger political perspective, and what are the consequences the developments of which the elections, the holding of elections and the results of elections are one important piece of information. As an outside observer and also reading media reporting from and around Russia on these elections, one could make possibly two observations. The one is that inside of Russia and from the Kremlin's perspective, one could possibly argue that they seem less concerned about keeping a legitimate democratic appearance of holding these elections. We have seen a number of reports of administrative resources, the repressive climate that was sort of turned up before and during the elections, people going into exile, even less possibilities for media to report on this, and jailings and so forth. As Anastasiya said, there's very little room now for any public opposition movement to operate inside Russia. And we also saw not so many signs of demonstrations and protests and so forth after the elections, as we have seen in connection with other elections before. The other reflection is on the international reaction and reporting on these elections. And to me, it seems that there has been much less international interest, also media interest in these Russian elections, and also quite subdued comments and reactions to the elections from Western governments and elsewhere. Can this be sort of interpreted that we are sort of facing a new normal or normalizations, and that we are slowly accepting this as a normal situation? It should also be mentioned that, of course, the conduct of elections in any country in the OSCE region, including Russia, is not only something for the country itself, but there are international obligations, OSCE norms and commitments. And unfortunately, in this case, the conditions for having the OSCE to observe these elections in their traditional manner were not met, so they were not observed by the OSCE this time. But there's also the Council of Europe and there are international obligations that Russia has undertaken and signed when it comes to these things, and also on democracy, human rights, and rule of law. Would you, these two observations, would you agree with them, or what is the situation, both how the Kremlin views and how much it cares about its democratic image and credentials, both inside Russia and on the international stage, but also how do you interpret the international reporting and reactions to these elections, if we start here?
Thank you. If I may, first, short comment about the absence of major protests against this fraud on the elections. There will be protests, except that for now, people really are scared by this wave of repressions, and it's not that people are too much afraid of going out on the street, but they're really looking forward to having some qualitative breakthrough. They will be ready to go out and protest if they understand if that not the usual developments, like we come out in certain numbers, get beaten up, arrested, and that is it. So I get a lot of feedback, and my colleagues also do, from thousands and thousands of people across the country. And the major question is, we are ready to still go out on the streets and protest, but let's organize it that way, so it will be something absolutely unlike anything we have seen before. So we are right now thinking and strategizing about how to arrange it. There will be protests, except that it's useless to do it head on, to actually just simply call people out and then see the old story about street beatings, arrests, and so on. We need many more numbers. We need to have it better organized. But the demand for protests never went away. You will see it. Same as we said before 2011. Many people did not believe, but then bang, it happened. So there will be protests. Now, on whether Putin is concerned or not concerned about legitimacy, yes, he is, both domestically and internationally. If he was not concerned about legitimacy, he would not invest so much effort and brutality into guaranteeing this election result. Because this Duma election is not about how the parliament is composed. Like, being a strong ruler, really strong, can tolerate a parliament which is sometimes, even allowing a minor dissent, where his ruling party might lose a majority and give away floor to systemic parties which are still loyal. So if he was only a strong, self-confident leader, he would have allowed that, just to let off steam. But these elections are not just important by themselves. This is an important gateway into 2024, into extending his rule. This Duma will specifically approve the framework for holding the next presidential election. They will define the rules. So this is why he needed supermajority at any cost. And this is all about his vision of legitimacy. He wants to demonstrate, as we call in Russia, a spravka, exactly what I began with. He wants to demonstrate the numbers on paper as legitimacy and claim that everybody else is a marginal who doesn't have public support because the paper says so. The paper says 80%, then it's 80%. Same as Lukashenko, right? However, both Lukashenko and Putin are in the process of learning the important lesson that figures on paper by themselves just do not work. Legitimacy is a complex phenomenon. They will keep, Lukashenko already have discovered a lot about that. Putin is on his way, but yes, they do care about legitimacy also internationally. I think we just discussed before this seminar that I strongly advise for people who say that Putin doesn't care less, what the West has to say. Please watch the Russian coverage, the state media coverage of the events surrounding the restoration of the Russian delegation in the Parliamentary Assembly in the Council of Europe, and the election of Pyotr Tolstoy as a vice president of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Listen, they were so happy, like they won World War III. We had like many days of head bashing, like see how great we are, that the West had finally recognized that we were right and they were wrong, and we have reinstalled. But this is just about a delegation in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, but the fanfare was so loud that really you would have thought that we really won World War III or something. There are many other factors. Just take a look at how much money they invest in lobbying and interfering in European politics and Western politics in general. I have recently published a report for the Boris Nemtsov Foundation about Putin's influence, political influence network in Western Europe, and how much money they spent on their lobbyists and so on. For Putin, money is crucial. He wouldn't waste it for no reason, meaning that his vision of maintaining legitimacy in the West is through bribing loyal politicians and advancing his goals through interference, disinformation, and so on. But he does care about what the West has to say. And importantly, I think the West, and Europe in particular, has not been using their potential and their strength sufficiently to actually say openly to Putin what they really think. There are good exemptions. For instance, the recent report overwhelmingly approved by European Parliament on strategy and policy towards Russia. I haven't seen in years, probably ever, such a good and comprehensive paper on such a difficult topic. It's really very good. For those of you who haven't read it, please read it, and I just hope it is implemented. And one of the things that contained in there that the European Union should seriously consider not recognizing the results of the past Duma elections, because it creates a time bomb. If we tolerate Putin's complete disregard for the law, he will not stop. He will go further, and actually there will be more and more trouble down the road in the Russian-European relations. Many people think that, okay, if we forgive Putin this or that and turn the page, tomorrow he starts to behave like a normal guy. Believe me, he will not. He should not be led away with things like that. And it's not only bad for us Russians, it's also bad for Europeans, because he feels that when there's no reaction to all this repression and fraud at the Russian elections, that Europe is weak in general, not on that particular issue, so he can proceed with his aggressive policies. So I think it's important that this whole issue of Russian election is not considered as a separate, periphery sort of thing. But he will look at the European reaction and he will decide a lot on strength or weakness of Europeans. This will mean a lot further in Russian-European relations.
Thank you, Vladimir. Anastasiya, your comments on this.
Yes, I probably would like to add about Russian civil society and so-called people-to-people contacts, which are continuously remembering in all papers and also in the paper Vladimir has mentioned. So we see that Putin tries to keep all international politics in his hands, and this is a very Soviet tradition when there were no direct contacts without state approval. So all these packages of laws are not only about foreign funding or some things they told officially, but also about bringing more difficulties and more restrictions to direct contacts between Europeans and Russians. And this thing should be admitted and recalled always. And we should continue trying to keep all contacts and all communications we have now and even try to enlarge it. Nevertheless, Putin and Kremlin would like to cut Russians off international society. I often heard about the necessity to keep to be more accurate in human rights agenda because it could be harmful for Russian partners, it could be harmful for Russian civil society sector. Please believe me, Russian civil society sector really want and wait for some specific and very concrete words and measures from Europeans, because it doesn't mean only some direct support or something, but it does mean solidarity and the notice that they are seen, they are not invisible for Europe, they are not invisible for international community, and Europeans care about what is going on in Russia. So my belief is that we should strengthen contacts, we should strengthen communication, we should enlarge it as soon as we can, also using and involving Russians who live in abroad, who live in Europe. And we should not give up our colleagues, our friends, our partners, those who work inside Russia, and those who try to keep the space of human rights, of independence inside Russia, especially in Russian regions.
Thank you. I would like to pose a couple of more questions to Vladimir and Anastasiya before opening up the floor for comments and questions, but I would like to encourage the audience to start. We have a couple of questions already that have come in, but to formulate your questions and send them by the Q&A function if you're watching this on Zoom, or through the comment field if you're watching this on Facebook. I also want to clarify that the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies, we don't take a stance. We provide a platform, a forum for discussions, listening to views and commentators from all parts, in order to try to understand and analyze the situation in Russia and the rest of the Eastern Europe in a better way. And the same, of course, goes for the Swedish Institute for International Affairs. A quick question here to you, Vladimir and Anastasiya. I mean, you are both active sort of as a politician or civil society activist. You both said, you know, you spoke about we and protests and things we are working in. So who are we? What is the political subject that you are representing, and who are you representing when you use the word we?
Thanks. Specifically speaking about myself, of course, I represent Alexei Navalny's team for a long time. We know each other for almost 15 years now, and I have been one of the active public faces of Navalny campaign for the past 5 years since he announced his presidential run. I'm one of the major hosts of the Navalny Live television YouTube channel, which became a key tool of communicating with Russians on social media. So I think a lot of Russian opposition forces have been centered around Navalny's movement, and even those who are not part of it, many of them have recognized the effectiveness of the smart voting campaign, because that's a very simple and very effective tactic against the United Russia monopoly. It really proved that it can mobilize millions of people to effectively go and vote against United Russia monopoly. So when I say we, I specifically mean Alexei Navalny's team, but however, there's obviously a broader we, many people who do not necessarily associate themselves with Navalny's team, but we really were involved in the same cause of actually overturning the autocratic monopoly in Russian politics and bringing about choice, competition, fairness, openness, all the stuff that we don't have. So there's a broader range of network. I think many people can be considered as allies and friends, including Anastasiya here. She had been developing her very effective foundation in Warsaw, also trying to mobilize Russian diaspora, also to vote against the ruling party in the recent elections. But not only that, however, I have to say that this was one of the important missing elements in the past years. Russian diaspora was not really engaged in domestic politics, unlike, say, Ukrainian, Georgian, or Moldovan diasporas. I'm also actively working right now to connect this missing link, and there are many people who are helping us on that. By the way, we have colleagues have created a movement called Vote Abroad, which was very active in connection with these elections, and Anastasiya was also instrumental in helping set that up. We have flipped some of the districts in this particular election where on the Russian polling stations, United Russia narrowly won, but votes from Russian citizens abroad have overturned this and helped propel forward the smart voting candidate, like District 181 in Tomsk, for instance, which was won by smart voting with the help of Russian voters abroad. So it's in a lot of sense civil society exercise, but also it has a political dimension. So when I say we, I consider all people who are engaged in building a free and fair, open and transparent society are allies, but I specifically represent Navalny's network.
Thank you. Anastasiya, when you say we, who do you represent?
Yeah, first I probably would like to correct a little Vladimir, because neither me nor my colleagues involve people in voting against United Russia, but we just try to mobilize Russians abroad just to take part in voting and to see how they probably and how they could do their right, civic right on voting. And this was just more or less informational and critical thinking exercise than agitation or political thing. But as people who critically thinking can choose, and they are not under the pressure to vote for somebody, they can choose more smart choice and more independent one. And yes, I maybe rather I'm not maybe using we too much, because I also feel myself like as independent expert more or less. But yes, I work with Russian activists in Poland, in other European countries, and sometimes I use we as a part of this diaspora network. I also have a lot of friends and partners, really close for me, people inside Russia who work in civil society sector and human rights. And I think I have a right to tell we, me with this meaning, as a part of civil society of Russia. And actually, yes, I quite in a crossroads between European civil society and Russian civil society. And actually, sometimes I can use we speaking about European civil sector and European civil society as well. This is maybe the advantage of being activists in exile.
Thank you. Turning back to politics in Russia today, and what is the scope, what is the room for politics in Russia today? You both are active in Russian politics, you can say, in one way or another, but you are not able to conduct your work from inside Russia's borders right now. And normally when we talk about politics, we talk about politics as dealing with conflicts of interest, conflicts of goals that inevitably exist in all societies, about substance on economy, labor market, social issues, environment, and so forth. And there's an ongoing competition and contest from various parts of society, and that is politics. And you, Vladimir, also mentioned this, that there's no more any mechanism of feedback today in Russian politics. And this is, of course, also an interesting observation, because the pluralistic system, freedom of media, political opposition, of course, is a constant feedback on things. How would you describe the Russian political scene today? Is there a room, or either on the federal level or on a local level, for politics as I talked about it today? Or what is politics in Russia today, and what are the conditions to conduct sort of a more normal political contest and conversation in the Russian society?
Thank you. And first, I mean, let me, in a broader sense, explain what Russian system, Russian politics is today. It's like when you live your normal, ordinary life, you're not even political. You may be even supportive of Putin. So you do daily stuff. You go to grocery store. You go to children's playground with your kids and so on. And one day you wake up, go to the street, and you see that the grocery store, your favorite, is closed because of the pressure from the competing big retail chain next door, which is owned by one of the Putin's friends. And your children's playground have been removed because this land was allocated to another oligarchs who want to build a commercial, development project there. And there is nothing you can do there is nothing you can do. There is nowhere to go. You don't have a parliament member. You don't have a local council where you can decide this. It's all controlled by the ruling party. And they said, well, there was a decision made somewhere so that no children's playground, no favorite grocery store, go to that retail chain and pay a bigger price, which goes to pockets of some of the Putin's friends. So this is how it works, and you find out that government. When you know that there's a huge debate in the Western societies about retirement age. 3 years ago we had a retirement age reform. So normally, when this issue is raised, there are arguments brought, economists speak, parties have different positions, they fight in parliament whether we should raise retirement age or should we not. Not in Russia. Somebody decided that retirement age is to be raised, and that is it. People who disagree, they have nowhere else to go. Or the government decided that we need to optimize healthcare and reduce the number of hospitals, reduce the number of doctors. There's nowhere else. If you want to get treatment and no doctor is available, you have nowhere else to go. You have no party to complain. You have no members of parliament who can help you. It's all United Russia, which is saying, well, sorry, but the decision was made and you're out. This is how Russian politics works. So it became completely detached from ordinary people who feel there is a huge crisis of representation. As what Nastya has been speaking about, referring to some of the Russian commentators, and the repressive reaction from the authorities is their response. They feel that the crisis of representation is very serious and nationwide. So they send a simple message to the people: stay put. Do not try to challenge the system or we'll put you in jail. And this is what was happening all over the past months. So you say, is there a room for politics now? I have to say, in terms of classical grassroots politics, politics as we see it in the Western world, no. Putin is trying to completely eliminate or independent, not even political, but civil activity. Because every day you hear that, like even some vegetarian local NGOs working about environment or human rights or some other societal issues, they're being shut down, declared foreign agents, undesired organizations, and so on. Any independent media, I mean, they're aiming to kill all the independent media space within months with declaring them foreign agents. Maybe, I hate to say it, but in a few months down the road, we might see all remaining independent media outlets completely gone. So there is no room for independent political and civil activity on the ground, but there's good news because we're in the 21st century. We're not like Soviet dissidents who departed the country and have lost all the communications. We do have communications. Even with all the attempts to shut down internet, we'll find ways to circumvent all that and to reach out to ordinary Russians. This is what we do all the time because the government spares no effort in trying to block our access to people. But we are, we technically are far more proficient than they are, and we can circumvent that. We will find our way to reach the hearts and minds of the people, and we do have important grassroots support, because again, circling back to the beginning, people feel that they are completely disconnected. They can't go anywhere with their problems. They're not represented at all. We give them hope that we can restore the system where they will have a real representation. Yes, we have to do it from abroad, but there's plenty of opportunities to continue broadcasting, and our support is actually widening despite all the crackdown. So no civil and political activity on the ground, but we can still mobilize people through online tools and other technology means and so on. There's this big grassroots demand for mobilization, for protest, for changing the system into far more representative one. So we will simply have to utilize technology to circumvent the crackdown on political activity. It already worked. We've seen this through this election. It can work better in the future. We got to learn some lessons, do some reflection on what happened, and we come back with even more enhanced tools how to work with society directly.
Thank you. Anastasiya, from your civil society point of view, is there any scope for what we, at least in the West, understand as normal politics in Russia today?
Yeah, actually, Vladimir has described the situation, and I could add that when this ordinary person see the situation, see what is going on with his space of life, with his kindergarten, some hospital nearby, local transport which is closed or something like that. He does not keep silence, but instead of this, he starts to be active, and these local issues, these local situations are the source of local community building and local protest movements, which are numerous now in many regions. And actually, it's impossible to stop them because people are demanding to be represented, and when they see that nobody represents their interests, they going to do everything to be represented by themselves, by their neighbors, by those of them who are more or less active, and starting from, I don't know, trying to keep their play yard or the trees in the yard instead of new building up. They end with election campaign to local authorities, or they end with some online local platform for public discussion. And they do it in really innovative ways. And sometimes we can see more innovative instruments emerging in Russia than, for example, in some European states. And I believe some European civil society activists, grassroots activists, could learn a lot of things from their Russian colleagues sometimes. So we can see this activity, and we can see it's going on, it's developing, and it is impossible to shut it down because it's not about federal elections, it's not about Putin, it's not about some single activists or single activism, but it's about life of ordinary normal people, and they try to defend their space of living, their space of existing. So this is a fight which is going on, and I believe it couldn't be won by Kremlin anyhow. But of course, it's really difficult fight, and that's why people who doing it and who supporting these local activists, they need feel solidarity, they need feel support and attention from also from abroad, not only from inside of Russia.
Thank you. We have now a number of questions from the audience, and I will group some of them together. And we have approximately another half an hour to go. So I would also ask both, I would try to pose the questions in as short way as possible, and also ask Vladimir and Anastasiya maybe to give short answers so we can allow room for as many questions as possible. I have some questions here regarding the political field and landscape in Russia. Hans-Gunnar Adén, for instance, asked that thanks to the smart voting system, the Communist Party seems to have become the main opposition party. Will the communists really be able to transform themselves enough so they can perform such a role? There's another Facebook comment here, question on why fight the system instead of just backing up Yabloko? And another question from Facebook is that there is a common view amongst some Western leaders that it is difficult to define an opposition in Russia, and in any case, it doesn't have a vast support of Russians. Therefore, the main dialogue should be with the regime. How do you deal with such conclusions, and which type and which is the support is the most productive one? So, you know, are there two? Is the system too fragmented? What is the role of the communists now? And the last question then is who should sort of Western political leaders talk to? Briefly, please, Vladimir and Anastasiya.
First, I think there's too much attention for obvious reasons, but it's wrong. Too much attention being paid to this issue of Communist Party. Listen, we are not in a fancy Stockholm restaurant. We are in the Soviet Stolova, right? Soviet diner, which offers you a couple of dishes which were already eaten by somebody yesterday. That is it. That is the choice. And it is a deliberate choice by Kremlin administration that they don't allow good guys on the ballot. There's only bad guys. So our choice on the ballot is to choose between bad guys, real bad guys, and very, very, very bad guys. So I suggest that when you analyze Russian elections, you forget about parties, candidates. There's no such thing as parties and candidates. There's only a ruling party and how much it wants to get. Elections are a referendum on the ruling party. Elections in Russia are run in the following way. Some folks in high cabinets decide who's going to be member of parliament in which district. And then the administrative machine works all the way to make these people actual members of parliament. This is it. So smart voting is not about communists or not communists. Forget it. It's about showing that people have a say, that voters have an equity stake in this shareholder company, right? They're not just passive spectators. Many people like to focus on the fact that smart voting had supported communists because in many districts they were the strongest candidates to beat the incumbent. But in many districts we supported candidates from different parties, Yabloko, Spravedlivaya Rossiya, LDPR, Partia Rosta, and they either won or finished the second. So important is not who the communists are. Important is whom we, smart voting, support. Today it's communists. Tomorrow we switch to somebody else and forget about communists. They will not have any meaning, any importance. Plus, even from communists, you can get some positive outback because yesterday the major news was that the police had seized the headquarters of the Communist Party in Moscow because they wanted to submit litigation, to submit an appeal, legal appeal to courts on the voting results, the electronic voting in Moscow. So they actually circled their headquarters not to allow their lawyers to get out with the documents and reach the courtroom to actually get an appeal. So there was a very serious standoff between Communist Party and Putin's police. So they are useful sometimes. Communist Party is useful as a tool to actually to breach these walls and barriers that Putin's built. So we will be using any available tools to peacefully breach United Russia's monopoly. There's this question about Yabloko. Why not support Yabloko? Sorry to use this analogy. There was this rock album by a British band called Sex Pistols called "Flogging a Dead Horse." Unfortunately, smart voting is the system which is specifically designed to support the strongest candidates with big potential to beat United Russia in their districts. We cannot, by design, lift off people from the dead, unfortunate as it is. If Yabloko does not effectively campaign nationwide, we cannot do their job for them. Smart voting is a system which adds steam, adds votes to strong candidates who are popular, who campaign, who work with voters, who do stuff. If you don't campaign, don't do nothing, don't work with voters, don't do stuff, there's nothing we can do for you. We're not magicians. Smart voting is a system against, it's designed to amplify the power of strong candidates, not lift people who are absolutely incapable, which has been proven by 30 years. I mean, sorry, we would love to support Yabloko as a party. We openly said we will do that if you, on your pre-electoral Congress in June, put forward a very strong coalition list of candidates from different opposition forces, not the party apparatus, no names, but the real strong candidates from real different opposition forces across the spectrum. If there's going to be a united joint list under Yabloko ticket, fine, we will easily issue a recommendation to vote for Yabloko. They didn't. So why? I mean, the answer to the question is, please remember the name of the person who topped Yabloko electoral list. Can you, I mean, and what about the recognition of name ID among the Russian society? So again, we cannot do their job for them. But listen, I'll probably stop here because I think I'll explain some major principles of how we work.
Anastasiya, on fragmentation and who should Western leaders speak to when they want to speak not to the government, so to say.
I probably will continue what Vladimir has told. About 10 years ago, amongst the Russian spin doctors, the notion about the special notion began be used in Russian. It's subjekt в движении. It could be translated into English like a body for nomination. It means that candidates and local politicians, regional politicians are really not care about ideological part of the political party, rather than about their capacity to nominate them as candidates and to give them an opportunity to come to the ballot list. Means not collecting signatures, for example, fight for them during registration and keeping them in this lists of candidates. Nevertheless, some regional or federal administration wants them to be eliminated, to eliminate these candidates, and so on. So in fact, or help them to defend the votes after the voting day. So in fact, now we see that Communist Party, LDPR, Just Russia, Yabloko as well, it's in many regions, it's not ideological or massive parties in its traditional, maybe old style European point of view, but more about some specific people, active, independent, who wants to be to have some meaning and to have some decision-making access. And when we are speaking about fragmentation, it's also about it, because there are a lot of different people. They are official in different parties. They nominated by different local party organizations, but instead of being fragmented, they in fact are connected to each other through different informal networking inside regions, between different organizations. And their party affiliation does not mean a lot in this sense, but much more meaning for them that they are representing people, their community accept them as leaders and try to push them further for further activities as leaders, and they see support from each other and help each other during the election campaign, during some other campaigns, and try to be at one page. And this is not about fragmentation, it's about community building, which is much more developed now in Russia than 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. So in this case, who to speak to for Western partners, I believe any independent person who could show their who they represent really is a person to be spoken to. And that's why, for example, we try to conduct, even now in COVID times, as much online events as possible, just to connect these people to colleagues and partners, potential partners in Europe, in the European states. And that's I mean when I told, for example, not just some kind of learning from Western countries about democracy, but also learning about modern and innovational instruments of activism, of community building from Russian activists by European colleagues. It should be some exchange, it's equal relations and equal networking in fact.
Thank you. Now I have set a couple of other questions from, I think, in perhaps somewhat opposite perspective from yours. One question is sort of implying that there are signs, or it could be interpreted that Western countries are supporting opposition and also are involved in activities and funding various activities that can be interpreted that the goal of this is to topple Putin. And on somewhat on the same theme, there's a question about Putin's concern on legitimacy and related to Crimea, and that the West has condemned the alleged Russian annexation of Crimea, and there has been sanctions imposed on Russia. But there was a referendum in which the people of Crimea choose to go back to Mother Russia. So why is the West being so hostile to Russia? Is the West hostile to Russia? Are there sort of conspirational Western-supported, Western-funded work to undermine the current regime and government of Russia? What's your take on this?
No, the West is not at all hostile to Russia, and I remember the times when I used to work in Russian government. And actually, listen, this is so much forgotten. I think we need to bring this back and actually remind people how many efforts and money the West had injected to bring Russia back from the collapse of the post-Soviet years, and not only in financial terms, but also to provide training and understanding of modern government and the local self-governance and institutions and make markets function and so on. How many efforts were spent actually to help Russia get a market economy status, which Putin is enjoying right now. So the West was never hostile. Of course, Western countries often pursued their own interests, but the West was never hostile. It was in a lot of ways was friendly and cooperative. And I remember these good old times we were not left alone with the Chinese communist regime or dictatorships like Assad or Maduro, but we were part, it's Putin loves, this is one of the part of the greater state religion these days, the victory in the Second World War. So Putin's beloved holiday is the 9th of May, World War II victory celebrations. So I remember the times in 1995 when Clinton was there, John Major was there, and many world leaders were there. Like over 60 top global leaders were in Red Square celebrating the anniversary and 50 years of victory in the World War II. Last time Putin was alone with Tajikistan President Rahmon. And that was it. So that is actually this sort of illustration of evolution that Putin's assertive foreign policy had achieved. But when we were in good relations with the West, nobody was hostile, and the West was actually helping us. Also, I think the Western countries have been maybe too consistent, I think, in their approach to Putin. They are ready to talk to him and engage in dialogue with him. The only condition is that he behaves normally, does not kill or imprison his political opponents, does not invade territories of other countries. You see, I mean, the past few months have been filled with a Western desire to talk to Putin. Summit with Biden, initiative by Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron to have another summit with Putin. So the West does not try to topple him. They try to talk to him, and we don't like it. Many people in the Russian opposition say, oh, the West is too tolerant, too friendly towards Putin. He keeps killing his political opponents. He established a specific murder squad in FSB using forbidden chemical weapons, forbidden by the International Convention, funding all this through taxpayers' money. and going after his political opponents and killing them. Still, West wants to talk to him. So I think my take and the view of many of my colleagues would be that the West is too tolerant on Putin and not save the hostile part, right? So I think I heard this song before many times, that the West is helping the opposition get its fundraising. Where is the single proof? Show me. That's the important part. Because when we come down to specifics, we find out that all the fundraising of Navalny's team is solely done by proceedings from Russian citizens, and they had to hire an unknown Spanish citizen to send $50 to Navalny's anti-corruption foundation to declare as foreign agent, because we haven't received any other penny from any foreign person. And when journalists contacted this Spanish guy, he had no idea. He was not able to explain how he did send $50 to Navalny. So I think, no, the West is not hostile. The West was cooperative when we were young and Russia was normal. Only Putin's aggressive course, also invasion of foreign countries and seizure of territories like Crimea. This was not a referendum. This was not a referendum. A referendum is something else. A referendum is at least something where you can campaign for a no. It was explicitly forbidden, and people were oppressed for campaigning for no at the Crimean referendum. That's to begin with. It's just 1 point out of probably 200 points about this thing. But it was not a referendum, it was annexation, and it's quite clear that nobody in the civilized world wants that people redraw borders by force. So it's not a hostility. Hostility began at the other end of this equation.
Anastasiya, on the West and its role and the perceived hostility.
Yeah, I live in Poland, and in Russia, it's often told that Poles are they don't like Russians, they don't like Russia, and it's a Russophobic country. So I live there for almost 10 years, and I can say as my personal experience that anytime I'm asked about where I'm from and I'm telling that I'm from Russia, I get a response that oh, Russia, we like Russians. We don't like that you have Putin, but we like Russians. And this is the better example, I believe, about the Russophobic and hostile relations. So we really, I believe, really any just ordinary European citizen could divide and accept what is going on, and see that one thing is Russian people and another thing is Kremlin, Putin, and their politics. And this is the main point, I believe. And even if we see the recent document accepted by European Parliament, it is also said about that there is no enemy in Russian people for Europe, but we have and we admit that Russian people needs and would like and would have more freedoms. So about Crimea, it was not a referendum. I'm very sorry to admit it, but it was not a referendum, and it was and people even who I know and who even supported the idea of Russian Crimea, who live in Crimea, they also say that it was not a referendum. Nevertheless, they could say yes or no, but I believe that without normal and regular rules referendum, there is no point to say that Crimean citizens, Crimean people vote to be part of Russia. So it's really annexation, and the Crimea is annexed territory, and unfortunately, it is just breaking all European rules, and this is a point why Putin and other people who are related to this process, they could not accept it as regular European partners, and this is not about some Russophobia or hostile relations, but it's about just about stealing, you know, and that's all.
Thank you. We have 10 minutes left of this webinar. There are many questions, and unfortunately not all questions will be able to be raised here. And I will give back the floor to Anastasiya and Vladimir soon, also to make some final remarks and conclusions based on today's discussion. But I will also add on 2 questions here, which you can also choose to react to in your final remarks. One of them is concerning corruption. And there's one more general questions about, you know, the role and discussion of corruption, and another one whether what is the awareness of for instance, Catherine Belton books about Putin and Putin's people and so forth. And in general, I mean, there has been a number of books published by Western journalists and analytics and academics on situation in Russia. How much awareness are they translated? Are they read in Russia? How are they perceived, and so forth? And perhaps with a particular focus on corruption. Another question is the role of Russian foreign policy, also in the elections in the electorate. And is there a change in the electorate when it comes to relations, normalizing relations, for instance, to Ukraine, the EU, the West, the US? I mean, you can add on to this the thought experiment if we would have a change of government in Russia, where many from the sort of current opposition would come into power. Would that necessarily imply a change in Russian foreign policy? Or is there sort of a more general Russian view on foreign policy, Crimea, Ukraine, and the view on the West, which is actually unifying both, you know, the current government, but also the opposition? But 2 to 3 minutes each for your final comments, and also if you would like to comment very briefly on these questions, and then we will have to wrap up this seminar. And I will give the floor first to you, Anastasiya.
Lot of topics, actually. I probably tell about corruption just very briefly and leave it to Vladimir. We have really very specific corruptive regime when we see that there is less local level corruption or some bribery thing, but it is high level corruption when in fact it is a part and instrument of the state. And this is the worst thing we have by now, because in fact all our institutions are officially corrupted, and it is legitimized by the authorities, first of all, and promoted by authorities, in fact. And this is a point why we need not only fighting and do some activist work, but also we should think a lot. We should think a lot and should present and represent and develop a more detailed image and picture of probable future for Russia. Russia without corruptive system, Russia without hostile international policy, and Russia with modern and European-oriented, culturally European-oriented future. And this is also what we try to do, and try to give people in Russia the opportunity to think about what country do they really want to live, to dream, because currently they have lack of dreams, in fact, and this is a case. And that's why we are fighting for the Russia, not only for good Russia, not only for happy Russia, but also for Russia with dreams and with people who can dream. I believe this is a point for us, and this could explain a lot of these questions you've told. And that's I finished with, and give the word to Vladimir.
Thank you. Vladimir, your final concluding remarks, 3, maximum 4 minutes.
Thank you. On corruption, we talk a lot about corruption with ordinary Russians, and I mean, there's no deficit in that. This is what we would do every day. So one of the reasons for this extremely strong protest movement is that people are fed up that corruption is endemic on all levels, and it's an integral part of the system that was built. So corruption inevitably follows political monopoly. Russian people get it more and more each minute, even as we speak. And Catherine Belton's book, I'm actually quoted a lot in it. No, I think it wasn't translated. It will be, but there is a widespread portfolio of information and investigations on corruption that is not only done by Navalny's team, but also by independent investigative journalists and many other folks. This is like every day there are major new revelations about extreme corruption in Putin's system, and that really helps to open the eyes of the Russian people on the foreign policy aspect. That is very important, because Russians often are wrongly perceived in the West as people with some imperialistic nostalgia. They are not. They are not. Great majority of Russians, even official opinion polls would tell you that like 2/3 want reconciliation and normalization of relations with the West. And the fact that people are viewing some other countries as hostile has been going off on and on with television propaganda. Like 15 years ago, we had a huge campaign against Estonia on Russian TV, because they moved some of the war memorial, and there was a huge outcry, and 70% of Russians considered Estonia as a hostile state. Only about 10% now, according to the polls. So that's a huge on and off regarding what propaganda has to say. So please bear in mind that all this, what you consider as imperialistic sentiment, is a foam that will wash away once the propaganda is gone. Majority of Russian people do not want any aggression. Even official rhetoric about Ukraine is not aggressive, that we need to conquer them with the iron fist. No, propaganda says we're just helping to save the brotherly nation, which is under attack by fascists and American imperialists. That is what is being said. So we're saving them. We're not conquering them. So there's very little deep-rooted aggression in the Russian society, and the opposition obviously is a translator of that. We are firmly standing on positions that international borders should not be redrawn by force. We're committed to rule-based democratic order, and that's the same principle that we apply to domestic politics. You can't be rules-based domestically, but aggressive and imperialistic internationally. We're universal. We're totally committed to the idea of treating our neighboring countries as sovereign states that are absolutely equal with us. One country, one vote principle, and we don't want any exclusive zones of influence. We want open borders. We want free trade. We want free movement of people, capital, and investment. And normalization of relations is essential to our well-being, to our economic development. We can't achieve that if we pursue aggressive imperialistic policies. Russian citizens will have to suffer economically and suffer badly, proven by Putin and his years of rule. So that's the foreign policy view on the opposition part. Thank you very much for this talk, and I hope it was helpful. And the concluding remark is simple. Please do not invest too much in numbers that you officially receive from Putin. Pay attention to the underground struggle which is often not really reflected in the Western discussion. But the struggle is there, it's strong, and there is hope that Russian society will prevail.
Thank you, Anastasiya and Vladimir, for joining us here today, and that you, during your visit to Sweden and Stockholm, was able to come to Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies for this conversation and this webinar today. I think what we've heard here today are two very engaged, a politician and one civil society activist. You are Russian, you want to contribute to the future of Russia, but you're not able to do it from within Russian borders right now. You are not sort of cool-headed analysts or objective in that sense, but you have been adding to our understanding of what's going on inside in Russia and what the implications for Russian society, Russian people, but also the rest of the world are. So thank you very much for adding your views, your analysis, your comments and your reflections to these developments. This webinar has been recorded and will be put on YouTube in a day or two for if you want to view this again or for new viewers. And of course, stay tuned. The Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies will arrange more webinars, publish reports during the autumn, and we are in constant growth and an establishment phase. And also a very warm thank to our very active audience, which has put a lot of questions and comments. Unfortunately, the time didn't really allow to ask all these questions in detail, but I think we have covered a lot of ground and also covered the gist and the spirit of most of the questions. And I also want to extend a warm thank to colleagues at the Stockholm Center of Eastern European Studies, without which this webinar could not have been, this webinar wouldn't have taken place. And there are many of my colleagues who have been involved in today's event. Thank you very much. Stay tuned. We will continue to keep an eye on and try to understand and analyze the situation in and around Russia, but not only in Russia, but also the other Eastern European countries. So please come back. Thank you very much for joining us today, all of you.